The moment the hush fell over the old-fashioned diner, it felt as if the walls themselves held their breath. A woman in a faded blue waitress uniform crouched on the black and white checkered floor, arms wrapped protectively around a trembling German shepherd puppy. Above her, the polished leather shoe of a sharply dressed man hovered inches from her shoulder, raised like a weapon. His partner, a woman in a pale designer dress, stood behind him with an expression twisted between irritation and entitlement, her manicured hand frozen mid-gesture. At the far end of the counter, unnoticed by most, a man in a navy uniform slowly set down his coffee, eyes narrowing with a quiet, controlled fury. It was the kind of moment that reveals who people truly are, those who harm, those who suffer, and those who stand up even when no one expects them to. If you believe kindness and second chances make the world better, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe before the story continues. Moments earlier, the diner had been alive with everyday chatter, the clinking of cups, the sizzle from the kitchen, the laughter of children echoing from the booths. The waitress, a young woman named Lena, had brought her new puppy to work because she had no one else to watch him. The pup had been found abandoned behind her apartment building the night before, shivering in the cold rain, barely old enough to walk steadily. She had taken him in without hesitation, even though she struggled to pay rent and lived off tips that fluctuated with the moods of strangers. She had named him Scout, promising quietly that she would give him a better life than the one he started with. To her, he was already family. But when Scout slipped from behind the counter, tail wagging innocently as he wandered toward the fancy-dressed couple seated near the door, everything spiraled in an instant. The woman recoiled as if the puppy carried a disease, shrieking, while the men stood up with exaggerated outrage. His voice rose, full of disdain and superiority, calling the dog filthy and calling Lena incompetent. Lena dropped to her knees beside Scout, whispering reassurances, trying to shield him from the chaos. And then came the motion that silenced the entire diner, his foot lifting sharply, aimed not even at the puppy but at her, as if she were something beneath him. Something disposable. The Navy SEAL at the counter, Ethan, saw everything. He had been stationed nearby for training and had stopped in for a quiet breakfast before heading back to base. But there was nothing quiet about the storm brewing inside him now. Years of discipline kept him still for a moment longer, analyzing, assessing, deciding. He had witnessed cruelty in many forms, but something about the raw fear in the puppy's eyes and the unflinching protectiveness of the fragile young woman ignited a fire he couldn't ignore. Lena held Scout tighter, bracing for pain, her body curled instinctively around the small creature who couldn't defend himself. Her life had been full of people who took advantage of her kindness, landlords who doubled her rent without warning, co-workers who took credit for her efforts, customers who berated her for mistakes she didn't make. But in all her struggles, she had never learned how to fight back. She did not expect anyone else to fight for her either. The man's foot descended just an inch closer when a hand, steady and firm, caught his ankle midair. Gasps erupted throughout the diner. Ethan stood behind him, not with aggression, but with the calm, immovable authority of someone who had seen far worse and would not tolerate the smallest injustice. The rich man sputtered in outrage, shocked that anyone dared intervene, while Lena stared upward, wide-eyed, not fully understanding what had saved her. What followed was a tense, charged moment where the entire diner seemed to unite behind Ethan. The elderly woman holding a teacup near the counter, the children in the booth clutching their milkshakes, the off-duty cook leaning against the kitchen door, all watched with silent approval. The rich couple, realizing that not a single person in the room supported them, faltered, their confidence cracking under the weight of unanimous judgment. Without needing to raise his voice, Ethan's presence alone made it clear that their cruelty had consequences. Shame replaced arrogance, and the couple retreated quickly, muttering excuses as they fled the diner in a flurry of embarrassment. Lena remained on the floor with Scout, shaking slightly from the adrenaline coursing through her. Ethan knelt beside her, not as a hero expecting praise, but as a gentle stranger offering reassurance. He asked if she was all right, though she could hardly find her voice to respond. The puppy nosed her chin, sensing her distress, and she buried her face in his fur, letting tears she had held back for far too long slip free. For the first time in months, she felt seen, not as a servant, not as someone invisible, but as a human being worthy of protection. The diner owner came rushing out, apologizing to Lena profusely and offering her the rest of the day off. But the truth was, she didn't want to go home to her small, lonely apartment. Something about Ethan's kindness, steady and genuine, made her feel safe in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Ethan offered to walk her and Scout home after his meal, ensuring she wasn't alone. The walk became a turning point in Lena's life, each step easing her fear, each word reminding her that good people still existed in the world. Over the next few weeks, Ethan returned to the diner regularly. Not out of obligation, but because he admired Lena's strength, her selflessness, and the way she cared for Scout as if he were the most precious thing in her world. And as Scout grew stronger, so did Lena's confidence. She applied for better jobs, stood up to her landlord, and began to rebuild her life piece by piece, supported not just by Ethan but by the community that had witnessed her moment of courage. Sometimes heroes appear in uniforms. Sometimes they appear in the small decisions people make to show humanity in the face of cruelty. Ethan didn't just protect her that day, he reminded everyone watching that compassion is stronger than arrogance, and that standing up for others can change their entire world in an instant. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share to help spread kindness.